Good tidings and even better greetings. Welcome to League Unlock. My name is Eric. Thank you, you lovely people, for hanging out with us as always. And as we usher in a new, that's actually old era into the LCS for 2020, we're having some fun this offseason. We're going to be going through and listen, League's been around for a very long time, so we're looking at these historical moments and runs and really just the entire team history for a lot of the big teams in the LCS. We'll hit the LEC, the LCK perhaps, but first we got to start with some of these teams that are making their returns to the LCS, and some have had bigger gaps of not being part of competition in North America or anywhere else, and some it's only been a year or two, and their brands, their franchises, their players, and their moments from the pro scene are still very fresh in our memories. And obviously, one of the biggest brands coming back to the LCS in 2020 is Immortals. This is a squad that, I mean, they were always good when they were around in the LCS, and people were fully expecting them to be part of franchising when it came around in 2018, but through some combination of them already being heavily invested in the Overwatch League, which was very new at that point. It had its inaugural season, and apparently Riot was not comfortable with a lot of the financial information that the CEO and management team had. Didn't look like they were making much money, so they denied that initial franchising spot. And then fast forward a few more years, and all of a sudden, Immortals are back. They're taking over Optic's spot for 2020. It's an entirely new management team. And obviously, Riot was much more comfortable with the finances. It's an updated logo, and we knew. That's why we never got rid of the Immortal jersey on set behind us. We knew that they would eventually be back in the LCS, and now we just have a cool, old school, classic logo because it did get updated for the 2020 split. But let's look back at Immortals' times in the LCS because it spanned for several years, and there were some very high moments. The team started, they weren't actually called Immortals, they were actually Team 8, and if you remember them way back in 2015, it's crazy that way back is 2015, but they were not terrible. They didn't ever make playoffs. They're most known for kind of beginning the incredible gauntlet run that Cloud9 had in 2015. It came to a tiebreaker. They had a chance to eliminate Cloud9 from ever even going to Worlds in 2015, but this is where the crazy run really ramped up for C9 all the way through that gauntlet run. You had Maple Street and Cali Trolls in the top lane, which is something you haven't heard in a long time. But for 2016 spring, the team rebranded to Immortals, and this is where maybe their most memorable roster comes in, which looked absolutely stacked on paper with Huni, Rainover, Pole Belter, Wild Turtle, and Adrian. And whew, they completely smashed the hype levels that they had. They went 17-1 in that first spring split, were clearly consensus the #1 team. They lost one set to CLG, but other than that, they were perfect. They were completely obliterating people. They kind of, in a similar fashion to what G2 has done in 2019, their playstyle was all about fighting. There were tons of kills. They had far and away the most exciting matches. We were hyped for playoffs. They go to semifinals. Unfortunately, they don't get to pick who they match up against, and it happened to be TSM, who came in as a 6th seed, but all of a sudden started rolling. This is the Lucian top game for Huni. They get 3-0 swept in the semifinals in I don't want to call it a massive upset because it was TSM and they were rolling, but man, people expected a lot more out of Immortals. They would finish 3rd in that 3rd place match, but they come right back in 2016 summer, and this time they go 16-2 and only drop games to TSM, who by the way went 17-1. And again, semifinals, they can't get it done. It's not a sweep, it's 5 games, and it's Huni losing on a carry again in a Yasuo where they lose this matchup. Actually, this is the series where he loses Yasuo top. So they lose in the semis to Cloud9. They're the final boss in the regional gauntlet, but you cannot go up against Cloud9. It goes 3-1 and 17-1, 16-2 in the regular season, and Immortals do not qualify for the World Championship. Just so disappointing for a team that was so dominant that split overall, and Then it got blown up the next year. Only Pole Belter remained. And you go to 2017, you have Ole, Flame, Dardoch comes in as the starting jungler for the spring split, and they're not nearly the same expectations for this roster. Cody Sun is completely unproven. Ole's first time in North America, Flame's first split in NA, and Dardoch, he puts up some great carry performances, but we know the history and all of the issues that he has outside of the actual game. Immortals would end up going 8-10, just narrowly missing out on that final playoff spot. But they did have, again, some solid performances, but eventually the toxicity issues would resurface, as they seem to always do with Dardoch on this roster. And coming in to the summer split, he stayed there with them, but in summer, as you know, it was one of the biggest mid-season trades. You don't really ever see trades in the esports team, but that's exactly what happened. It was Dardoch going to CLG, and Xmithy comes over to Immortals. Very contrasting play styles, but all of a sudden, CLG eventually, by the way, would bench Dardoch in favor of Omar God, whereas Immortals, all of a sudden things start to click. Xmithy seems to be the missing piece for this squad. They go from 8-10 in the spring season to 14-4. Second place right behind TSM in the summer split. They go all the way to finals against that very same team solo mid. And game 4 of the finals, this is the famous game where they had a 10,000 gold lead. It was 7-0 in kills. It looked like Immortals were primed and ready to force a 5th and decisive game out at TD Garden in Boston. But then, of course, TSM would get 20-1 in kills to completely turn the game around, come back from that 10K gold deficit to deny Immortals that top seed and their first LCS title. TSM gets the three-peat, and funny enough, this is actually the last time TSM won an LCS title, but Immortals come up short in the finals, but still an incredible turnaround season for them. They go to the World Championship as the 2nd seed for North America, and we remember how that run went. It started well, 2-1, and heading into week 2, all they needed to do, in hindsight now, is win a single game in the 2nd week of action. 3 games. They actually had 4 opportunities. That's the Cody Sun insect play that he now is infamous for, unfortunately for him. And of course, Immortals end up going 0-4. Fnatic completes the dream miracle run to get out of groups, and NA Week 2 curse is in full swing. A very sour taste to the ending for that World Championship run, but they actually had some good moments. They went competitive with Longzhu. They beat Fnatic once, and they really looked like they could have been a team to get out of groups, but here they come a couple of years later, and you know that there was a huge fan base for this team. They had Huni and Rainover, Wild Turtle, Pole Belter, a lot of these players, huge fan bases. Obviously, Huni would go on to SKT before coming back to North America. Rainover, well, his times after Immortals didn't go so well after getting MVP in one of the splits. But I think this is a team that absolutely, much like Dignitas, is going to immediately have a solid fan base behind it, because there's already that established history of being a very good team in North America. I mean, we only had that one full year with that stacked roster. It would have been nice to see them run it back again, and it is still one of the biggest tragedies of the LCS that we didn't see that roster at the World Championship. Maybe you blame it on some of the crazy picks, Yasuo, Lucian in the top lane, but even in those games, Huni had some sizable leads in those matchups. So there was a lot that went wrong, but a lot more that went right for those Immortals rosters, and I'm excited to see them back on the Rift, whether it's Meteos, Crown, a whole bunch of new different players. That brand being back is only going to boost the viewership and fan base in North America.